You wanna get spooky?
Of course you do! Well, lucky for us, the campy world of slasher fiction has, over the past few years, been making its way from the big screen into the world of literature. And in case you haven't been paying attention, slasher novels are every bit as compelling as their big screen counterparts. So, let's have a look at some. Here are 5 fantastic slasher novels that might just keep you up at night. And if you're going to be spending a few evenings with nothing but a slasher novel for company, you're gonna need some atmosphere. And you can get just the right reading atmosphere with this video's sponsor, Serious Readers. I recently read the novel that inspired this video, Heads Will Roll, by the glow of my Serious light. And it was the perfect atmosphere for spooky season. Serious lights use daylight wavelength technology, which replicates the daylight spectrum as closely as technically possible. As someone who has ADHD and also reads a lot, something that helps me focus is putting myself in the right reading atmosphere. And in my experience, Serious lights do exactly that. Putting myself in a physical space where I feel more absorbed in the book. It is just me, the light, the book, and the darkness all around us. Of course, that does help a lot with spooky books in particular, but also just in general, Serious lights create a kind of bubble, and you just sit in it, absorbed in your book. Having a Serious light to read by has been a really transformative experience, and I'm super grateful. I also think my skin looks fantastic. So click the link in the description and use the offer code WILLOW24 to get £100 off your own Serious light. Thank you again to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video. Now, as I briefly mentioned, the book that inspired this whole list was Heads Will Roll by Josh Winning. And this book came to me in kind of a weird way. See, I'm a real mood reader, and like 2 weeks ago, it suddenly hit me that I really fancied enjoying a good summer camp slasher. And instead of just rewatching some Friday the 13th movies or Sleepaway Camp, something like that, I thought to myself, I bet there's a summer camp slasher novel. And as it so happens, Josh Winning, an author who I've had my eye on for a while, suddenly brought out a brand new summer camp slasher novel. It just landed in my lap. And of course I picked it up and read it immediately. And then the timing got even weirder. When I finished this book, checked the date and realized it was Friday the 13th. I finished this book that morning without having any idea Friday the 13th was coming up. And then obviously I spent that evening watching a bunch of Friday the 13th movies. By the way, the third one is so bad. Like, it's directed by the guy who did the second one, and I like the second one. And the third one is just a bunch of rote, boring nothingness. And it has the worst performances of the whole franchise, and that's saying a lot. Anyway, Heads Will Roll is a fantastic slasher novel. Now these days, I mean for the past like 2 decades at least, it's been impossible to create a slasher story that isn't in some way at least a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I guess we can thank Wes Craven for that. Slasher stories have to be self-referential, a little bit meta, a little bit aware of what they are. And Heads Will Roll is that, at least in part. Our protagonist is a horror movie fan. She's at a summer camp and she's very aware of that, and so there are references to other slasher movies. But in spite of all that, Heads Will Roll remains a fantastic, very self-assured, very unique and incredibly entertaining summer camp slasher story because it is laser focused on one specific issue of the modern day: cancel culture. Now, cancel culture is a complicated thing. It's very grey. There are lots of different ways to approach it and talk about it, and the book does just that. Our protagonist, who is technically nameless, was recently flying high in Hollywood because she was cast in the lead role of a hit Netflix sitcom. And then one day she tweeted something. We don't know what she tweeted. She just refers to it as Tweetageddon. But whatever the contents of that tweet, she was suddenly cancelled, as was the show. She is bombarded with hate, and so she goes off to a summer camp for adults, the whole point, the whole design of which is to remove people from technology. A lot of the people who go there are just addicted to their phones, addicted to the internet, and it's a place to get back to nature. So when you arrive, you hand over your phone and you reconnect with other people who are in a similar situation. And this is a great setup for a nice selection of characters. And the characters are my favorite part of this novel. See, slasher protagonists, if you can even call them protagonists, are often just meat for the grinder. You know they're all gonna die. You know they are just things to be killed in entertaining ways. And they don't have to have personalities. They can just be fodder. But in this novel, you care about every single person. Whether you like them or not, you are invested in their personal story. You really get to know all the people at this camp, to the point that I forgot that I was reading a slasher. And so of course, it's not a spoiler to say, these people start to die. They will be killed one by one. Some will survive, some will not. That's how a slasher goes. But I was so invested in them for the first half. I was enjoying their dynamics. I was enjoying getting to know them so much that when they started dying, I was heartbroken. I forgot that I was reading a slasher and I was like, no, stop killing my people. I like these people. And that's another way that this book really stands out in the slasher genre, is that you really get to like these people. And then of course there's the slasher villain themselves. The setup is a local legend about a girl who was beheaded, and now to this day she knocks on people's doors at night, and if you answer, her headless body will be standing there with an axe, demanding her head. And unless you can give her her own head back, which was never found by the way, she will take yours. That's the setup. It's super spooky, and as the novel goes on, you'll learn more about it. I've been vague about the details because you learn different versions of the myth, if it is in fact a myth. And you also learn the secrets of this summer camp, because all is not as it seems. I fucking loved this book. It was so much fun. Please check it out. Then we have one of my all-time favorite horror novels, which I'm surprised I'm saying, but when I think about it, it's true. I so fell in love with this book when I read it a few months ago. This is Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. And what I found kind of confusing as I was reading it is that I heard that this is a novel of queer liberation, and yet as you read it, it is the straightest thing in the whole wide world. See, the whole situation of the book is that it's set within a reality TV show. I've never seen The Bachelor or anything like it. I'm not clued into that culture. Can I call it a culture? I've never seen any of that stuff. I've never seen Love Island. I feel like I'd melt if I did. And the characters in this book are the cast and crew of a Bachelor-style TV show called The Catch. And for one of the episodes of this season, they've all been sent to an island off the coast of Washington State. It is cold, it is raining, and there is something on this island, something that, thanks to the title, we know is called Patricia. And for the longest time, we don't know what Patricia is. But we have a group of girls who are all competing for the love of this one man. We've got the man, and we've also got all the people behind the camera as well. They are all there, and they are all potential victims of whatever Patricia is. And as you get deeper into the novel, you do start to see how it is a kind of queer liberation story. And I was really surprised by how that was handled. And I'm also obsessed with the choice of title as well, because for the longest time, we don't know what Patricia is. And in fact, until the very end, Patricia's name isn't mentioned. And that's quite unique when it comes to slashers, because the aesthetics of a slasher killer are so iconic. Ghostface in Scream, Michael Myers with his William Shatner mask, Freddy Krueger in his jumper with his glove. I could go on and on and on. These aesthetics are part and parcel of the genre, and yet in this novel, the killer is some kind of creature. We don't understand it, we don't know what it is, and we know from this sinister, ominous, kind of playful title that its name is Patricia, and we know that it's killing people one by one for some reason. This book is so much fun. And this is Maggie's Grave by indie darling David Sodergren. David Sodergren is a Scottish author who self-publishes all of his horror novels on Amazon, and he has built up over time an enormous cult following. He's a very big deal, one of the stars of independent publishing, especially in the horror genre. And Maggie's Grave is a very, very camp, very bloody, very gross, very horrifying slasher story. We begin in 1657, where the titular Maggie is living in a cottage at the edge of a small town in the Scottish Highlands. And the people of this town have decided that Maggie is a witch. And so in the first chapter, a group of men turn up at her house and kill her. Fast forward to the modern day, this town is all but dead. There's only a handful of people left there. Unemployment rates are really high, and there are like 4 teenagers in the whole town, and so of course they're all friends with each other, and they have nothing to do. One day, an American hitchhiker turns up, and she asks this group, like, what's there to do here? I'm traveling all the way up through the UK. I've ended up in this town. Show me something fun to do. And they say, well, there's Maggie's Grave. So off they go up the hill outside of town. And this American hitchhiker has sex with one of the boys on Maggie's grave. And for some reason that I now can't remember, this brings Maggie back. And the scene of her returning while these kids are having sex on her grave, it is absolutely batshit insane. It is gross, it is horror. Oh, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but what a scene. Oh my god, I love it so much. I can still picture every detail. It's horrible. It's so good. And then from there, Maggie wants her revenge, and one by one, these kids may die, as may other people. Maggie's Grave is gross and horrible and brilliant. I love it. Now, unfortunately, the last 2 books that I want to talk about, I don't have copies of anymore, which I didn't know until right now. I think I must have got rid of them while I was moving. I offload a lot of books. This is why I never do like a bookshelf tour, because it all changes all the time. I don't remember getting rid of them, but here we are. And the first of those 2 books is Grady Hendrix's The Final Girl Support Group. As I said before, slasher fiction is very meta, very self-referential, very self-deprecating sometimes. And Grady Hendrix doesn't just do that with slashers. Every single one of his books focuses on a specific aspect or subgenre of horror and deconstructs it in a really fun way. He's done vampires, exorcisms, haunted houses, and also a slasher. The Final Girl Support Group is about exactly what its title says, a kind of therapy group for a bunch of women who, when they were teenagers, were each the final girl of a slasher massacre. Now they're all middle-aged and they still turn up at this group all the time to discuss their traumas and their history, but one day, one of them doesn't turn up, and we know she's been killed. There is a slasher who is going after final girls of slasher stories. And our protagonist is the most interesting one of the bunch. She's a final girl, but there are 2 things about her that are kind of interesting. For one, other people claim that she's not a real final girl because one of the criteria of being a final girl in a slasher story is that she kills the slasher. Quite often, as she's trying to get away from the killer, the final girl will somehow figure out a way to kill them. It happens over and over again in the Friday the 13th films, for example, and it's become kind of a cliche. And it didn't happen with her. She was left alive. And the other interesting thing about her, kind of like Laurie Strode in these newer Halloween films, she's very, very paranoid. She lives alone in an apartment with lots of security, like 10 deadbolts on the door. She's terrified, she's paranoid, but now she's going to step up and find out who is killing final girls. And so this book is kind of a thriller, kind of a detective story, and kind of a slasher. And the thing is about slashers is that they are thrillers. They're not often that terrifying. They are mystery stories and they are thrillers. And this one really leans into that aspect. It's super duper fun. And then finally we have My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Now I know that this book is the first in a trilogy. I haven't read the other 2, so I'm only going to talk about this first one. And this is a very, very referential book. Our protagonist, like Stephen Graham Jones himself, is Native American. And she's also very autistic coded. I don't remember if in the book it outright says that she's autistic, but she certainly comes across as very neurodiverse. And she has a complete obsession with slasher films. Throughout the novel, she spills her encyclopedic knowledge of slashers. And as someone who loves slashers, it was really, really fun to get all of these little behind the scenes tidbits and lesser known facts about slasher movies. She's a really fun character, and she's now living through her own slasher story. And even though she's in the situation, she also feels outside of it because she is privy to so much knowledge of how it all plays out, how this goes, what the formula is. And also the novel itself kind of feels neurodiverse. It feels like an ADHD novel. The way that it's written in this stream of consciousness, going on tangents, chopped up piecemeal, moving from here to there kind of a style. It can be very distracting. It can make it kind of a challenging read. Some readers don't really get on with how Stephen Graham Jones writes because he has this poetic, wordy, literary style to how he writes. It doesn't gel with everyone, and I sometimes struggle with it myself. But it also feeds into how the characters process information, how they speak, how they think. It's very immersive in that way. So I see the good and the bad of writing in that style. And overall, I think My Heart is a Chainsaw is a brilliant metafictional, very neurodiverse story. And like all of his books, it is one of the more unique horror novels that exists today. A really strange and arguably challenging time. A lot of these books are very, very devourable. I got through Heads Will Roll in like 2 days. I was addicted to it. My Heart is a Chainsaw feels a little bit more dense, and I really don't want to say elevated, but I'm tempted to. I really hope you enjoyed this list. If you're a slasher fan, I hope that you've got a lot to sink your teeth into here. I've actually got a TBR of even more slasher books that I found recently, and if I end up reading them soon, I might just do another video because I love slashers. They are my comfort food, and I know I'm not alone in thinking that way. If you have any recommendations, by the way, let me know. Thank you again to Serious Readers for sponsoring this video, and subscribe for books.